All right, we're live. Excited to kick off iPullRank's full month celebrating Black History Month. Excited to have a chat with these two wonderful gentlemen here. So this is the first of many events that we're hosting this month for IPR celebration of Black History Month. This one, we'll just be having a casual conversation about our experiences as Black men in the corporate world. So I just, I want to give maybe 2 minutes for folks to start to come in, but I don't know. I'm excited. I have these conversations with my friends fairly often and my siblings as Black men. So it's cool to really have like an open forum for us internally at IPR. So I'm excited to chat with you guys.
I'm excited about my piano.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, just a much more chill, more honest conversation as opposed to making it like, again, super corporate. We're trying to make this as as casual as we can. So we'll just let people keep coming in, and then in 2 minutes I'll get started.
Cool. Sounds good.
What do you guys think the theme music should be for for sharing our experience?
Can't tell me nothing.
I like that.
The IPR jingle music.
That's a good one. Yeah, I was thinking the first song that comes to mind for me a lot of times is Dedication by Nipsey and Kendrick. Like I feel like that's like my motivation song for my low moments. I gotta jump in on that one. So I think that's a good record too. Let's see. Just check LinkedIn because you can't really always see the comments coming in. Demetrius, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the celebration. All right, so I don't know if who wants to start it off in terms of introductions. I can start it off. If that's not a problem. My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm Senior Digital Marketing Specialist here at iPullRank. My experience goes back about 7 years. I got into marketing. Started off freelancing, doing work with creatives, musicians, influencers, YouTubers. For years, also jumped into some work with some social media for some big name companies, and then found my home here at iPullRank about a year ago. So excited to be here, excited to share like how I got here and just the overall experience, and excited to have a conversation with you two gentlemen. So Vitthal, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here too. Happy Black History Month. I've been in marketing about, I guess I'd say 7 or so years now. Started off in college, kind of like anybody that was doing something creative or doing music or had a clothing line or whatever that wanted help with socials or marketing strategies. I always just kind of had like a love and passion for branding and things like that. So that's how I really jumped into it. Then right after college, jumped straight into digital marketing strategy across a different number of organizations, and did some freelance stuff, even some more entrepreneurship stuff along the way too. And yeah, ended up here at iPullRank as an account manager through a bit of a connected the dots type of way where I went from iPullRank client to iPullRank employee. So it's been great.
I'm Mike King. I work for these folks. That's it.
The boss man, Mike King. Yeah, so as we, of course, we have some conversations around the organization, but I think that one of the big topics that came up as we were planning this was just the idea of professionalism. A little while ago, I had a conversation with you, Mike, about professionalism being subjective, and I'm sure, like, as Black men, all of us have walked into rooms and had experiences where maybe from our background or the way we were dressed or the way we looked, people may have felt like we were unprofessional, whatever that means. So I'm excited to hear you guys' take about just what professionalism actually means to you, where you might draw the line between that idea of professionalism versus just being straight up anti-Black and anti-Blackness, and how you navigate that just in your day-to-day with dealing with people outside of Black culture.
Yeah, I think the idea of unprofessionalism has loosened up since I was younger. I remember I had my internship at Microsoft and my mom was like, "Oh, you got to cut your hair." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" Because, like that back then, I either had like cornrows or a fro or something like that. She's like, "Nah, you got to cut your hair before you go out there because, that's unprofessional." And I think a lot of that is, kind of handed down by the generations before us because that's the way they grew up and so on and what they were told. But I think that where we're at now, there's just more space for people allowed to be who they are, like even with Black women, them changing their hair so often was considered unprofessional and things like that. And so, I think a lot of it was largely cultural and not really an understanding of the value that you bring to the table. And I'm happy that I've matured to a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm just not allowing you to put that on me. And also the world has matured to recognize that some things are just us expressing our culture and, being more comfortable with that, I guess.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I feel like even for me, my career obviously is not as long as yours, but when I came into this working primarily with Black artists and Black music, even when I would deal with their teams and when I would have conversation with management or an A&R, it was almost like they weren't working with Black music. Like they didn't understand, to send out a portfolio or to have somebody look at you because you work primarily with Black artists or because you walk into a room with earrings on and they're like, "Oh, wait a second, maybe that's not the guy that we were talking to through email." It's just it's a super interesting experience for sure. And I do think, to your point, it's changed drastically. Vitthal, can you kind of speak to that? Because of course,
yeah, 100%. I'm glad that Mike brought up the value piece of it, right? Because I think that's really same thing. What helped me is leaning into the value that I bring to an organization or a room or whatever it is, and allowing that to boost my confidence of me being myself, right? Because I think that my upbringing and my culture and everything like that, I've always been clean cut. I've always been suited and booted wherever I went. That was just what I was comfortable in regardless. So I was even in a room of executives or whatever, working there, wherever I was working, I was the only one with a tie on or whatever the case may be. And so, but still my earrings, right? I got my ears pierced later and I got my ears pierced in college, right? And I had people telling me "You're not gonna wear those earrings when you get that professional job, right?" And things like that. And it's nah, I wouldn't. But then once I was able to lean into the value that I bring, I'm nah, I get more success being myself, being authentic. I'm a better version of me. I'm bringing more value. This is what makes me comfortable. This is who I am. I have to tone that down from somebody else's version of professionalism. So, and fortunately, like you said, it has progressed quite a bit.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you know, professionalism is like, can you do the job? Can you do it well? Can you communicate what you're trying to do effectively? And all the other things that have been added on top of it to be like, oh, well, you know, they're largely like dog whistles to indicate like, hey, doing things you naturally do them as a Black person is not accepted. And, you know, I've just never really been down with that. And you know, like I'm not someone who like code switches, like the same way I'm talking to y'all right now, same way I talk to clients, same way I talk to anyone else. And you know, I've just been kind of like defiant in that respect, because it's like, yo, my work speaks for itself. So I don't care how you feel about, you know, how I'm presenting myself. If I want to wear a button down shirt or whatever and be, you know, fresh or whatever, I'm gonna do that because I want to, not because like you're saying like, oh, you have to do that to be included here. I'm never gonna, you know, play that game with people.
Yeah, I like the code switching piece because I mean, I think that coming right out of college, it was something I unconsciously did to an extent, and then I had really had to let it get out of the way of me communicating, because at some point it's getting in the way of me having questions or me bringing value to a room where I'm trying to figure out how do I say this in a way that is acceptable, or how do I like, instead of just naturally speaking what I feel and what I have to, you know, to attribute to the conversation. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is about comfort, right? Like you do your best work when you're comfortable. If you're always having to like translate what you really think so other people can accept it, you're spending so much time doing that when you could just be thinking of great ideas.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I think we all like initially when you come in, you're like, okay, how am I supposed to be? How am I allowed to react? And then after a certain point, you're just like, nah, I'm gonna just be me, like accept it or don't.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that being comfortable is super important. To Vithal's point, I know when I started trying to get my first clients and like reaching out to people as a freelancer, I think for me, it was definitely hard to not code switch and to not, especially since I felt like there were other things on top of the fact that I was Black going against me, like be it being a freelancer, not having the big names on your resume and things of that nature. You start to feel like maybe it's just me. So you start to change certain things about the way about your approach. And Jay-Z has this really great line that I love. He said, "There's nothing wrong with my aim. I just got to change the target." Yeah. And that's essentially what I what I started to realize, is that it was that I was talking to the wrong people. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with me. But I like, Mike, you brought up a good point about like the way you react to things. And I think when it comes to, obviously, of course, when it comes to being a professional, you think about getting the work done and doing the work to the highest standard. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on really quickly regarding professionalism is just like over the last couple of years, we've dealt with a lot of tragedy. There's been a lot of incidents, the most recent one being Tyree Nichols. But just like I feel like as Black men, oftentimes when you walk into work every day, like there's an expectation that you have of the quality of work that you're going to produce. And sometimes in general, whether it's at home or in the world around you that you see, there may be times when you feel like maybe you're not your best. Maybe you're just not feeling it that day because of some of the experiences that you might experience, or the things that we experience as a whole as Black men. And I know for me personally, I definitely come into work after days where you read a certain article and it's just like, there's times when you don't want to have you might not want to have a conversation with anybody because you're just frustrated, angry. Just give some insight as to like how you handle that, like what on those days.
Yeah.
Like, what is it like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a reality of being Black in America, and not just Black, like other people of color as well. But it's Black History Month, so that's what we're talking about. You just live with certain pressures every day, right? And like you, when you don't live with that, you can't really even understand it, right? Like when you feel like you could go outside and get shot by a cop at any day for no reason, it's something that's always like a base level of noise in your head. Now, if you don't have to deal with that, you can't even understand that, like, hey, I'm distracted today because I just saw another example of this. And it's difficult to make other people understand that. It's also difficult to make them understand that, like, these sort of things in different ways. Like, okay, I know that I'm going to walk into a meeting and I'm going to experience microaggressions that people are going to be like, oh, why are you so mad? Why are you the angry Black guy? Like, because you said something foul to me. How about that? You know what I mean? And so people just can't really understand where you're coming from with that sort of thing. And it's something that you've got to really learn to navigate. And I think it's something that we all just kind of naturally learn to navigate. But there are certain moments, especially when you see something in the news, where you're just like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I, pushing this down? Like, I'm ready to put a black beret on and get a machine gun and go outside and go crazy. Obviously, you don't actually want to do those things, but like you have this feeling of rage that you just have to navigate all the time. And it gets in the way of you doing your best work. Like, that's just the reality of it. But we all just have to find ways that we can do something productive and positive. And some days that's just doing your work well. And some days it's like, I got to take the day off. I got to, go do something that's going to make me feel better about being a Black man in this world. But these are all complex things that we've got to navigate that just people that aren't experiencing this just can't understand.
Yeah, I think that I don't have like a real answer as to how I navigate it, right? Like it happens and you kind of have to, I mean, I think like internally, if I look internally, right, it's about leaning into the emotion, right? Like not letting the emotion control me and kind of be more like it's an emotion that's passing through me, not defining me. And sometimes, like that looks different every single time, right? Like maybe that means I had to take a break and go do something where I felt like I made a change, right? Or like, I'll say, for example, when George Floyd was killed, right? Like this was like COVID. It was like I was in New York City, everybody was at home, like everybody was scared to leave. And I remember there being like murals being put up and graffiti being put up around the city and things like that. And I had just recently out of nowhere bought a camera, right? So like for me, that meant going out, taking pictures of all this stuff, right? Like documenting it, making it like, and that brought a little bit more awareness to me in terms of like, okay, everybody doesn't feel this way. There are other people that are going through this and do understand these feelings, even though it's easy to get caught up in a bubble of like, all right, in corporate American, professional America, whatever, who I'm dealing with they don't understand this, but there's a whole other side of people who do, right? So leaning into that, being together on things, right? Like having those conversations with the people you do trust that do understand what you're going through as well. Like that's one of the biggest things I think that do help me navigate it, right? But there's never an easy answer, or never like a fix for it, so.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that the biggest thing, and as we're having this conversation, I'm starting to realize it. I think the biggest thing for me has been having that community and having like people that I can reach out to on the side, outside of my coworkers and my colleagues, whether that's like my siblings, my dad, all of my Black friends, where we can just like have conversations in a group chat and just like let it out. In that moment, because it is it's an extremely frustrating experience, but it's also super difficult to navigate, especially in an environment where you're working with a group of people who may not have that general understanding, like Aaron or Vitthal or Mike, he might not be feeling it today. Because like for me in those instances, when I see it on the news, like that night, I can come into work the next day and be like, okay, like some of us aren't going to be okay today, and that's fine. Like some of us are not in the right frame of mind, and I know it because I'm also not in the frame of mind all the time. But one of the things that I did want to touch on as well, in that same vein of like professionalism and being comfortable, one of the things that I feel like a lot of us experience either early on in our careers or sometimes it can kind of plague you throughout your career is just the idea of imposter syndrome and not necessarily feeling like you're up to snuff with your colleagues or people around your organization, or like when you're actually, in the job search looking for a new home or a new job. So I just want to get you guys' thoughts on like how you feel about imposter syndrome. Like, have you ever experienced it in your career, and like what was that like, and what did you do to combat that?
I don't know that I've experienced imposter syndrome. What I've experienced more is people telling me that I'm not good enough, and then me quickly understanding that I was a stronger contributor than those people. There was one role I had where they didn't want to offer me the full-time job, and then they made me like a contractor instead. And the people on the team had a lot more experience with like the consulting aspect of things than I did. But as far as like understanding what they were consulting on, I knew far more, right? And so like ultimately, I just needed to get up to speed on the consulting stuff, like writing about what we do, and then like, preparing compelling arguments and things like that. And, that took me a couple months, but then once that happened, it was like, all right, well, what y'all got? Because like I have both things now. And so I think that the thing is that we often get put in those situations where it's like, oh, you're not good enough. And inherently, because of the situations we're in, and this isn't just, for Black men, it's Black women too, we're always like working 10 times as hard. And then we quickly ramp up beyond wherever you thought we needed to be. So as a result, we end up eclipsing these people that tell us we're not good enough so quickly. So I've never had imposter syndrome. I've always had like, who do y'all think y'all are syndrome? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been fortunate as well not to have imposter syndrome. I think that like I've always had, just confidence in my work ethic. Like I think that's been a big factor in me not having imposter syndrome. But something similar that I can say I had to deal with is because I'm so hard on myself. Because I'm a big critic of my own work, I can be constantly focused on what I'm trying to improve, which isn't necessarily something that is wrong for me, like the way I operate. However, in a professional organization, when you're looking and somebody else is evaluating your work, or somebody else is looking to hire you, or somebody else has a hand in you being promoted, if you're constantly focused, or if I've been constantly focused on what I'm improving, and all my conversations are about what's feedback, what can I improve, it's a lot easier for somebody else to say, well, these are all the things you need to improve, and have less to say about the things that you're doing well. So advice that I got around that was keep a tab of all the wins you get. Like, so anytime somebody compliments you, anytime somebody is saying you did this good job, or thanks for doing this, or whatever, like keep a running list of that type of stuff, so that when it does come time to be hired, or when it comes time to get a promotion or whatever, even having the same mentality on myself of like, okay, I'm always looking to chisel away the things I want to be better at. I can switch modes and be like, hey, look, these are all the things that I did great. These are all the things that are reasons I should be promoted to the next level, or things like that. So, bridging that gap between having confidence in what you do in your work ethic and being focused on improving, but also being able to speak to the things that directly align to getting you where you want to go and show, that you have the chops to get there. So, and I think that's something I see a lot in other people, right? Like where maybe they do have imposter syndrome. And I think Mike brought up a good point, right? Like a lot of times we work as Black people 10 times as hard. We're overqualified for things. We feel like we have to be 2 steps above in order to even be considered equal. So lean into that, right? Like keep that mindset, but lean into that in terms of like, hey, I feel this way, but this is what's actually on paper. This is where I actually need to be. So.
Yeah, I fully believe in that. I think to your point, I think as Black people, we definitely we're in a lot of arenas where we do have to work 10 times as hard. But then on top of that, you have people in the midst of you working 10 times as hard. You have people telling you like, "Oh, you didn't do enough work. You didn't do enough work to be here." And I think one, like self-awareness plays a huge role in this, because when you're super prepared and you understand like I've done the work to get here, it gives you a little bit of gives you a little bit of a moment of pause to relax a bit, just to know like, listen, I've probably been going harder than a lot of people that I know. There's this, among younger folks now, there's this idea going around on the internet of like, be delusional, like apply for that job even if you only fit 50% of the, like the idea of being delusional. But like, I think for us as Black folks, what we've realized is that we were never delusional. Like we knew what we had to offer and what we bring to the table. And so it's really a matter of like, sometimes, and I know this is a controversial take, but sometimes people have a tendency to expect a level of humility from us and want us to be so humble. I know my
we're not doing that one. Nah, but yeah, they do, right? Like you're not allowed to understand and be confident in what you can do and what you have done. I've had a lot of situations where it's like why do you think you're so good? It's like I got eyes and ears just like you do. I saw what I did. You know what I mean? So and we're not only are we expected to be like humble, but being confident is like you are attacking someone.
Yep.
Like they can't understand the fact that you can expect to be recognized for your greatness or for the great thing that you've done. And, I recognize that doesn't rub everyone the right way, but I also don't care. You know what I mean? Like if you can't naturally understand or give me, the props I deserve for what I've done, then I would be really loud about what I've done. And then, because there's no reason not to, right? Like there's no reason not to show yourself the respect for the work that you've put in. Especially when there's so many people who are mediocre, who are getting these positions and props and opportunities by putting in like less of the work. So I'm gonna be very loud about the great things that I do. And I want everyone else to as well. You know what I mean? Because like people should be recognized, respected, and given the shine, for the great things that they do.
Yeah. 100%. I think that as I look in the chat, I see my pops in here talking about like the thing about being threatening, right? Like experience that and people like it threatens people, but like that's not my issue. Like that, like we can't take that as our own. I'm saying that was something that I had to kind of deal with that too, in terms of like being comfortable with, all right, I might threaten somebody. Somebody might be intimidated by me for reasons I can't control, right? Like, what can I do about it, right? But you lean into it. You don't let that change your experience. You don't let that change who you are, and understanding what you deserve, right? Like you just said it. Like, why would I not expect to be recognized for achieving? everybody, like who doesn't achieve somebody and not want to be recognized something and not want to be recognized? Like, but I'm wrong.
Why would you work this hard to stay the same?
Another reason.
You know what I mean? Like, what is the point? Yeah, to that point, just piggybacking off of like the idea of knowing your worth. Vitthal, if you could kind of like talk to me about the idea of compensation and like ensuring that you're compensated fairly, what that looks like. Have you ever experienced anything in your past where you felt like somebody tried to undervalue?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Whether it was like at a company or like, work that you've done outside of there.
Yes, I think that I was fortunate when I first came out of college to be in a program where things were pretty much laid out in terms of like, this is the range, this is the norm. Like, so I never went into anything blind. But coming out of that, had to really focus on having somebody I was comfortable having that type of conversation with about compensation, about specific numbers that wasn't directly involved in the process. And having that, it really allowed me to be like, all right, hey, look, this is the role I'm going for. This is where I'm at. This is what I have. What should I expect? And like being able to have that gave me a leg up. As far as a lowball thing, right? Like you got to have confidence not to accept that. Like really you should take it as an insult. Like, and I think that most recently I got an offer before I came here that was like, it just didn't make sense. Right. Like it sounded really great. It was commission and it was like, but the commission was paid yearly. And then they're telling me things like, we don't even know if it'll be around still. We'll see at the show. I'm like, like, why would I accept that? Like, why? Like, I owe myself more than that. And I think there's the quote, right? Like you never get what you deserve, only what you negotiate. So like that, you have to think about that from both ends, right? Like don't think about it just from the perspective of what somebody's offering you. Think about it from why can I get more than I deserve if I negotiate? Negotiation is a skill. If I'm good at it, I should get more because I negotiated more. That doesn't mean you're that doesn't mean you're overpaid. It doesn't mean you're underqualified. It means that you negotiated. So,
Yeah, I think that's where that's another area where imposter syndrome comes into play. A lot of people, obviously, this isn't necessarily exclusive to Black men, but just in general, I think a lot of people get offers sent to them, and especially in certain economies, they're just like, yes, like we'll take it. But I think that there is a conversation to be had, and most companies that you're willing to work for are going to be willing to negotiate. They usually have a range for those roles as you're applying for them. Beyond that, in my experience, I know like it was huge for me when I first started freelancing, was free work. And I had to nip that in the bud like very quickly, because what I realized was initially when I started freelancing, I was in my portfolio, I was showing a lot of the work that I had done for myself as a musician, showing people the numbers, showing people like what we had done to grow music videos and things of that nature. And I felt like the way that I was going about it, whether it was the proposals or like how I was pitching, but I definitely was not like reeling in the clients that I wanted. So I started doing free work just to get like people to review and refer me so I could get paid work. And I'm just going to be upfront about the free work was the worst jobs. Like those were the worst clients that I took on. They were the people that expected the most. They wanted the most revisions. They wanted, all of this extra stuff for absolutely free. And it was just an insane. So very early on when I was freelancing, I was just like, oh no, I got to up the price. And then I think something that is kind of overlooked when it comes to compensation is just like having conversations with your peers, whether it be people that you went to school with, people, joining those groups and kind of getting a lay of the land as in terms of what is this work at, when we're doing this, what is this work actually worth? Because I know for me, that was huge in freelancing, because even after I started charging, I was like, after I had a few conversations, I was like, okay, I need to be charging more. Like, I'm not charging enough for what I'm doing. Like, there are other people, who are offering less in their deliverables that are charging way more than what I'm charging. So I had to go back and revise the prices again. And it really is a matter of like the amount of knowledge that you like doing your research, whether it's like applying for a job or going through the process of like potentially negotiating for a promotion or a raise, or if you own your own business, like you have to know what you're worth on the market in order to properly price yourself.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask a question on when freelancing, entrepreneurship, things like that, right? When you have a client, you've negotiated a price, you got a good price. How do you manage, keeping tabs on, or towing the line of going above and beyond, delivering a
scope creep
product? Yes, essentially scope creep, bro. And not even necessarily scope creep, right? But just like you want to give extra value to grow a relationship. How you manage doing that, giving that extra value without costing yourself money?
Yeah, so really it's about how you communicate that this is an extra thing that you're doing, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna do this extra thing and then just like give it to them and not explain it to them. You've got to let them know that you're going above and beyond and say like, hey, it's a one-time thing. This relationship is important. I'm not gonna be able to do this all the time, but because we want to help you achieve this goal, yes, we've done this in this case.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's the sort of thing where people expect it and they think it's a part of what they bought when really you're going above and beyond. But the only thing I want to add to what y'all said, or really just reinforce, this is largely about information, right? Like, so people, being that there are often so few of us in these spaces, and obviously that's improving, but because there's been historically so few of us in these spaces, we don't have the access to the information in the same way that other people do. And so what you're saying is exactly right. Like understanding, what are other people seeing? What are they getting when they go after these jobs? And obviously there's a lot of resources now that are publicly available, like your Glassdoors and pay scales and things like that, where you can get a better understanding of what to expect. But also, like you said, don't allow yourself to accept something less than what you believe you're worth. Right. Like when I would get hired in, the roles prior to iPullRank, I would just ask, I'd be like, what is this role scope for? Like, what is the allocation for this role? And if they tell me a number that's below what I want, I'd be like, well, I want this. Is this possible? And, what I know from being on the other side of that is for the right candidate, yes, the company will stretch. So you got to just be confident. You've also got to like show up. You can't just be like, well, I deserve this, and like not interview well, because then no one believes that. But if you've shown up, and also if you've got receipts, right? Like if people know that you're great, then yeah, like there was a point where I basically started like a bidding war in New York City from a whole bunch of different agencies, and like a whole bunch of people were trying to interview me, and like I would just show up in whatever I wore that day and like didn't bring a resume, and I was just like, cool, so what do you want? Because like at that point, I was so established that I could do that, and I also wouldn't accept anything less than the number I had in my head. But that is also you building your reputation so you can get to that point. And I think a lot of people, because of where we're at with internet culture and everyone just like, yeah, I can get rich by being an influencer. Everyone wants to skip the line to being able to be in that space. But, bottom line is that you got to do the work first. And then once you've done it, don't accept less than what you expect.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end it off on, because for sure, I feel like oftentimes, especially now, to your point, Mike, there's a lot of step skipping going on. Yeah, we'll definitely touch on that later on in the discussion. What do you guys, in terms of, obviously, like we're talking about being fairly compensated, and then for for everybody who gets onboarded, like the next step for a lot of people is like, how am I going to further my career? How am I going to, take the next, leap or whatever? And just like any insights that you have on like goal setting and like the tips or tactics that you believe that you may have used or may have been helpful to you and could be helpful to some other Black professionals.
I think with goal setting, I mean, that's cool, but if you don't have the discipline to like make it happen, that's just you making a list of stuff, right? And I think I can speak for myself. There have been a lot of situations where I was like, yeah, I think I can do this, but then I don't have like the actual plan to make it happen. And what I've learned, and has worked for me is that not only do I set the goal, I break it down into like, what are the things that I can do every day? So as an example, just working out, because we all understand that, right? Like I was like, all right, boom, I want to lose X amount of weight by a certain time. Well, what can I do every day? Okay, I can make sure I get up every single Monday through Friday and go to the gym, like no matter what. And so the discipline is what allows me to get to those goals rather than like having to get motivated and be like, oh yeah, Monday I'll go, Tuesday I won't, Wednesday I will, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Yeah. And so now that it's like an everyday thing, I don't even think about it. It's like, cool, I get up, it's part of my day. Now I'm doing it. And so when you set your goals, you also want to set them in a way where it's like, you don't want to get to a point where they just feel so daunting and you can't achieve them. So you want to make sure that you're setting like goals at multiple levels, right? You want to have the ones where it's like, boom, I know that no matter what, I'm going to get through to here. And then once I achieve that, that's going to be motivation to get to the next step and so on and so forth. So, if you got your goal, let's say your goal is to make, I don't know, $1 million, right? Well, your short-term goal is like, all right, let me make sure that I can save $10 every day. And then once I achieve, $50,000, like, all right, boom, let me reset this goal to getting to $100,000 in a year. Okay, that means I got to save $20 a day for this certain time frame. So having the goals that can like reinforce what you're trying to do and boost you to get to the next level is, from my experience, the best way to do it. But as far as like having goals that are going to like lead you forward in your career, those have to be things that other people can also witness to some degree, right? Like if it's like getting a big win on a certain project, make sure it's a project that's going to be visible to the people that are going to impact your career. So if it's like certain mentors, make sure it's something that like they're going to see as part of their normal work. So as an example, let's say like in your case, Aaron, we're talking about marketing. If there's certain people that you want to know that you're doing great, make sure you're putting the work that you're doing in the channel that they're often active in. And so, that way your goals support you getting to your next goals because you're creating that community around you so that they can see like, oh, this guy is great at this thing. And when they have something that comes across their desk that's related to your goals, they'll be like, oh, let me hit up Aaron because I know he can help me get there with this thing.
Yeah, I think that ties there. Well, first of all, I knew what your answer was going to be, Mike, because we talked a couple weeks ago and I asked you specifically like what goals look like for you. I think that, like a goal without a plan is a dream. And I've always been good at dreaming. Like I've always been good at like, all right, I know this is where I want to get. Like this is the end goal. Like that's easy for me to conceptualize. The harder part is drilling it down into like what's going to get me there the most efficient way, step by step. And you hit the nail on the head with like the bite-sized pieces, actionable stuff that you can measure, right? And the same thing, I think, like professionally, one of the best pieces of advice I got when it came to like setting a goal for myself for the year within whether it be like a compensation conversation or whatever, is set something that's super, super specific. Like, right, like I'm gonna drive $10,000 in revenue this quarter or whatever, like something like that. So then when you get to the end of the quarter, there's a clear like, I did 12,000, I did 8,000 over here, and I can explain why I was short or why I was above or whatever. And then from there, you end a lot of conversations around like, all right, well, you're doing well, but we want to see you do this next. Where it's like, nah, remember 3 months ago when I said I was going to drive, we agreed I was going to do 10,000 and then we said that was the goal and I did 12. All right. So I think like applying that to life is the same thing, right? Like, all right, in one quarter, what can I do? In 1 month, what can I do? how do I break that down and to get there day by day, right? So
yeah, I think that at one point that was one of my challenges was getting more specific with my goals, especially early on. Um, that's a really good call out. Like be as specific as you possibly can with the goals that you're setting. And I remember shortly after I first come on at IPR, Mike did a podcast where the quote that he gave them was that he wanted to get all of his ideas out before he was gone. He was like, before I go, I want to be empty. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, like that's what there's been too many ideas, too much stuff that like I've toyed with the idea of, and then kind of like got distracted. But I feel like, again, like when it comes to goals, a lot of your goals are just going to be centered around those ideas. And I feel like we have so much to offer and a different perspective, whether it's like through like career growth and getting to those leadership levels where we potentially can bring about certain changes within corporate America, or through your own personal goals that you're setting. So be specific. I know one thing that's helped for me is writing them down, but because if I don't write it down, like I'm going to have a great idea. And then I can't remember who it was, but they talked about like rapping, and they were saying that they forgot some of their best verses because they were just like off the top of the head type of stuff. So like now when I get ideas, I try to write them down and actually like go through the process of like, okay, like what would the end of this look like? All right, now let's reverse engineer like all the steps that you'd have to take to get to this point.
Yeah. And then being like one or two at a time. Like that's one of the toughest things for me too. Right?
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of things, write those down too.
Yeah, but you got to prioritize.
Who are the one?
For sure. So one of the questions that I definitely want to get to before we bounce for you, Mike, is just like, what do you like as a Black owned business? Because iPullRank is a Black owned business. What do you think the importance of that is? Do you feel any obligations as a Black business owner? Like how do you approach, like, what do you think it's important to other Black entrepreneurs? Like what is your take on how you approach like just presenting yourself as a Black business to the world?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to other entrepreneurs because, you see someone like you doing a thing and you're like, yeah, I can do that too, right? And I think it's important to, be who you are because, again, people, they need to see authenticity. They don't want to see you be fake and just like kind of trying to play the game, because people see through that. And then again, they're just like, yeah, I mean, he's doing that. I could probably do it, but I don't want to be fake in doing this. And so that can also be discouraging. But, being a Black owned business is super difficult. You know what I'm saying? Like, just like trying to get access to capital and things like that, like basic things that people expect, can be very difficult. And then also there's always that underlying thing in your experiences, like when you go into pitches or you're trying to win business and things, and people are just like writing you off just because you're Black. And of course they're not going to say that. They're going to say things like, oh, we didn't think you were strategic enough, or other like things that are code for like, yeah, we just didn't like you because you're Black, basically. And so I think it's really important to be resilient and persevere through all those things, because it encourages and inspires other people to come up after you to do even more and have even more success than you did. So I mean, it's what I do. It's what I'm going to keep on doing. And, I'm going to win. That's it. You know what I'm saying? And like, I look forward to seeing the things that, ultimately the two of you do it when you go down the line and probably start your own businesses and things like that. And then we all build an even bigger network of Black business owners who, collectively bring our community up. And, I always think about like Black Wall Street and what that would have meant to United States had it like continued to exist. And there was like a whole study that McKinsey had done saying that, it was something like $4 trillion that would have been added to our GDP had it continued or something like that. I don't remember what the number was, but whatever it is, I'm excited to continue to do my part to like contribute to what that's going to be in the future. And also for what it means for my kids and what they see me do and what they believe is an option for what they can do in the future as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know, like for me, one of the things that as I was like going through my job search and I was getting ready to leave freelancing, one of the big things for me was like I specifically during my job search was like top of the list, like I want to work at a Black owned company. Like I want to be able to see people who look like me in leadership roles at least. Because throughout that process, you go and you're doing your research on the company and it's like meet the team and it's like nothing but white faces and you're like, okay, like, like you start thinking like like, are they even going to look at my resume? But beyond that, you start thinking to yourself, like, if I'm here for a certain amount of time and I'm delivering,
well, they're gonna look at your resume because you got a resume name.
Exactly. Which kind of speaks to, I know that a lot of us had parents growing up who specifically named us for that reason. And I know that my name looks a certain way on a resume, but like it was always frustrating for me to get to those about us, meet the team pages and always just see like nothing but white faces there. And so it was really important to me to find an organization that had Black people working in leadership, people that looked like me, who because that again speaks to not only just like your ability to work with your coworkers and work with people who again have an understanding of some of those issues that we referenced earlier, but it also speaks to like, does this come like, is there a growth opportunity in this company? Like, if I'm on here and I'm delivering and I'm there for 3 years, like, am I still going to be in the same spot? Like, is there any upward mobility? So I think my experience in terms of working for a Black owned company has just been that every day I feel like I'm coming into work in a place where I'm understood. Like, again, like I'm sitting here right now doing this fireside chat in a hoodie where like in other environments, I wouldn't be able to do that. I always feel like I'm able to be myself. I feel like, again, in those more extreme circumstances where, there's something going on in the world that only, we as Black people can really understand. I feel like leadership at the company gets it. I don't feel like anybody's gonna look at me crazy because I'm not having a great day the day after I turned on the news and saw a Black man getting beat to death. And that from those little nuances are important, because when I was freelancing, again, I kind of just had free reign to like look at a client and be like, hey, like I'm not going to be able to make that call today. Like, like I got stuff going on. But when you work at a corporation, there are different expectations. And when when you work for yourself, there are, things that you're able to do that you're not necessarily able to do. But I do feel like I have like complete kind of control over how I show up to work every day. And like, nobody is going to like really look at me differently. For how I choose to show up in terms of how I choose to represent myself and the way that I look, but also again in those circumstances that can be weighing heavily on your mental health. I feel like every day when I come into work, both leadership as well as the rest of my coworkers just like have an understanding of like, hey, like we get it, you're good. And I definitely didn't necessarily feel that way even when I was doing client work. It was just that I didn't really have to answer to anybody at that time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is the fulfillment, right? Like, I think that it's always great when you can get some type of fulfillment out of the work that you do on a daily basis. And Mike talked about it right now. Like, every day I come to work, I feel like I'm bettering something that is bettering my community. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm helping somebody else that looks like me succeed, or I'm helping, set the path, or, somebody that's coming up behind me that can do the same thing, right? Like, being a part of that and being a part of witnessing that or whatever, like, that's something that I never had other places, right? Like, you kind of, sometimes it's hard to look at yourself when you hear a story about like what the company you're working at is doing, or like you even like being a part of these companies, sometimes you witness things firsthand. You're like, this exists. Like, this is capitalism for sure. Like, this is capital. This is a machine. And then you're kind of like, man, this is part of the reason people that like me can't get ahead, or like don't have the same opportunities to get ahead, right? So like being part of something that is that opportunity is great.
All right, awesome. This has been awesome stuff, guys. I think this has been an amazing conversation. I'd love to do more of them like this. We can just sit and chat and discuss being black in America in general, but definitely because I think we could talk for days about that, but definitely being black in the corporate space. In terms of resources that Black professionals, specifically Black men, might be able to get their hands on for mentorship, as well as just like networking, because a lot of the conversation that we've had throughout this chat has been around just building community around yourself in order to further your career. So I've got a list of resources here. Vitthal, I don't know if you want to speak to any resources that you know of, or resources that have helped you throughout your career.
I mean, the ones I can think of are like business resource groups previously at other companies, being in a fraternity, all right, like being able to tap into that network is always beneficial, of like-minded people. I think that volunteering in general is something that has been big with finding, like good resources. One organization I can call out quickly is the First Tee. Which is, I grew up in the First Tee, which is a program around golf and like spreading the game of golf and its core values and things, even beyond just the sports aspect, to like inner city kids, or even beyond inner city, right? Like, but from there, it's a network of good professionals, people doing a lot of things, people that look like me, look like us, right? Like, and even people that don't, but just that have a general, focus on bettering, people professionally is beneficial.
Awesome. Mike's got to hop really quick. I'm going to go through a list of some resources that I found. And then if anybody wants the full list of resources, definitely DM me on LinkedIn and I'll shoot you the full list. But one of the organizations that we'd like to promote is the Black Global Career Network. That is a Facebook group of over 60,000 Black professionals. They really promote being your authentic self while managing your careers, but you can find everything in there, from opportunities to internships to other organizations to often they post grants for folks that are looking to start Black-owned businesses. I'm Black in Tech. That's a global professional community service group that basically they serve emerging tech startup founders, Black professionals primarily. And the membership for that one is free. And then we have some paid opportunities like the African American Marketing Association, as well as the Organization of Black Designers. So that is design across the board, from professional interior designers, industrial architectural designers, as well as graphic design and online media. And then a big one that I wanted to call out, specifically, you know, some of the conversations that we've had here, again, as Black folks in America, things can get extremely heavy. So we do have some mental health resources. One of them is Therapy for Black Men. So that's an online directory that basically just streamlines the way to find Black therapists for Black men, so that when you're going through some of these issues and you're dealing with some of these mental health battles, you can have conversations with a professional who understands you, understands your background, understands where you come from. And then another organization by the name of BEAM. And BEAM is the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. So it is also another online database, a directory of licensed Black therapists. And they deal primarily in telemental health services. So that's just stuff that you can all do online on your computer. But this has been phenomenal. We do have some events coming up to continue the Black History Month celebration. We'll be doing a women's talk next week on Thursday at 4 p.m., where our Director of Client Strategy, Chantel Branch, will be joining us, as well as we've got some other guests that we're currently lining up. And then the following week on Thursday, we will be holding a webinar on the influence of Black culture, specifically on the marketing industry. And we'll be delving into all of the different mediums that Black culture has been used as for both, obviously, promotional materials, but just like the overall conversation will be around some huge publications and the contributions that Black people have made in the marketing and advertisement industry. So definitely stop by if that's your jam, if you're into things like the history of things like Jet Magazine or Hot 97, and some of these major publications and people throughout the industry who have played a major part in marketing that maybe we don't hear enough about, because they've been a part of some of the largest campaigns for the biggest corporations in the world, and they're never talked about. So I'm excited for that webinar, excited for the women's talk next week, and I hope that everybody will join us. Again, my name is Aaron Johnson of iPullRank, and then we got Vitthal Parker, account manager at iPullRank, and thank you guys for joining. Again, DM me for that list of resources, and we will see you next week. Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month. Appreciate everybody.